Hey guys, happy Wednesday. It's not Wednesday, it's Thursday. All right, let's start again. It is Thursday, and we had some breaking news from the Justice Department today about the Justice Department suing Apple. And it's a fascinating case that I think will really resonate with so many of us. And yes, I understand the irony of delivering this news to you on an iPhone, which was really at the center of the government's explanation about why they believe Apple is engaging in anti-competitive practices and really hurting consumers as well as competitors in an illegal way. So big picture, the Apple iPhone dominates a huge swath of the American smartphone market. The Department of Justice today said it was more than 70% if you look at one particular statistic. So it's a huge part of the market. If I had to guess, I know not all of you are on Apple iPhones, but many of you are. And as iPhone users, we know that once you're in the iPhone universe, it's hard to get out of it, but it's also sometimes very handy. If your whole family has iPhones, you're able to work together easier, see pictures better. You're able to do all the things that Apple can do. That if you have one member of your family, my mother-in-law, who decides that she's not going to have an Apple iPhone, it doesn't work as well. Apple will say this is a magical experience for their users. The Department of Justice says this is an example of Apple behaving in an illegal way. By the way, my husband's side of the family give my mother-in-law such a hard time about being the one Android user of the bunch, just out of 20 people. It's why we have to use WhatsApp instead of iPhone text messaging. So that's actually a really good example. And what the Attorney General is saying is hey, there's consumer choice, but then there's also the consumer being more or less forced to go down this path because getting off of it is so much harder. Now, the Attorney General also used another example of how the government is alleging that Apple is really behaving in an illegal way and how they're working with developers. And this, the Justice Department is saying, is really tamping down on competition that could produce better things for consumers. Let me give you an example of this. So on the kind of development technology side, what the Department of Justice is saying alleging is that Apple is basically forming a club. And there's certain people that get in the club and there's certain people that aren't in the club. And if you're not in the club, basically you're barred from a huge group of consumers. And then if you are in the club, you got to pay Apple a lot. Let me give you an example of this. Some of you have asked, well, hey, Smarter News, develop an app. I'd love to develop an app for you. You kidding? That would be great. I can't wait to do that for you someday. If I develop an app, it has to work within the Apple ecosystem, and Apple will take 30% of whatever I make on that app. Now, Apple is a private company, and in some cases, it can obviously develop, restrictions or requirements if you're going to work with that company. There's a question, though, that when it dominates such a big part of the market, is it just doing it too much, essentially? And that's what the Department of Justice is saying. It's too much. They're too big. It's too much. This is a monopoly. It's violating antitrust laws. And Apple's saying, wait, it's not too much. The consumer likes us. We're developing a seamless experience for the consumer. We're trying to make their lives better. And this is one of the ways that we can do it. So there's two very interesting arguments about this case. So this is a great question. We should do a poll on this. Are you buying the Apple iPhone because you like it? Because you like Apple, you like the experience, and it's what you want? Or is part of you buying it because it would be too hard to get away from it? And that's really the reason. There's an ease of being part of the ecosystem that doesn't feel as much as a choice, but more like a little bit forced. Because that's going to be the argument. Apple says that, the case is wrong on the facts. They can argue for the facts for a long time. But I'm curious, the consumer matters here because depending on the results of this case, there's an argument that maybe costs would come down for consumers because Apple wouldn't be able to dominate the market as much in exactly the same way. Maybe prices come down. Maybe there's more options. Maybe technology improves for us. Or does this hurt Apple and then hurt the consumer that actually kind of like the way things were going?